Hello, my name is Sabiha Sharif, and I'm covering Chapter 5, White Supremacy. A little bit about myself. I'm an adjunct biology teacher here at the College of DuPage, and I have a master's in science and education and business. Oops, sorry. Let's talk first about a little bit about the history of racial violence. From the beginning, white people have been separating out African Americans from them, creating the other group, which is obviously not inclusionary at all. They've been gerrymandering districts to help whites so that they stay in the rich neighborhoods and the African American people would be in the poor neighborhoods. And even the schools very early on in our history were segregated. There's been a long history of police brutality against the African Americans. So you can see this great socioeconomic divide created from the haves and have-nots right away. There's been a long suppression and a long history, and it's been going on for a long time. And the interesting thing to note is, even though I think a lot of us are more enlightened now, we still have a lot of the old policies, laws, rules, and norms and customs that have been given the whites this advantage. We haven't changed them. We haven't recreated, our housing situation or our education for our African American students so that they have the same advantages as white people do. For example, we have more African Americans disproportionately in prisons, and then they're in white neighborhoods, which benefits them financially. The school funding that we have is based on property taxes. So if African American people live in poor neighborhoods, they don't have enough tax base to have very well-off schools. So the students from those areas don't get as good an education as people in white neighborhoods. So the cycle just repeats itself. And then you have these students from poor schools going to prisons, actually, or just repeating the cycle of poverty, which, is horrible because it really needs to be disrupted. Culturally, I think a lot of us have grown up to believe that being white is better and superior. This is a feeling that's been inculcated by them, whites, and also we've come to believe that as well and accepted it. We have from name calling to the lynching that we see, and then even today, if it's more humane, it's a lot of microaggressions still being conducted, like students being ignored in classrooms. It's still a real negative experience. It might not be as profound as lynchings that happen in the olden days, and I hate to say it, and the lynchings that are happening even now. So the white supremacy culture believes in white dominance and others should be subordinate to them. This can be further complicated when you have other aspects to deal with also, such as being female. That's even a harder thing. Being female and African American, or being old and poor. I mean, you have everything against you then. In the early days, the white the white men exploited and felt superior and dominated. He basically took land away from the American Indians. So he felt and taught himself to believe that he was superior, and he was able to do this to others, even though it was, pretty horrible. In a way, it's done still today with our immigration restrictions. We believe that other minorities don't have the same right to live in America as the white man does, and we restrict the flow of people in and out. I mean, you very often hear about Trump wanting to keep the Mexicans out, who are the drug lords and the rapists, etc. This, negative stereotypes. And when they do come here, the horrible thing is they're not even considered citizens of the U.S. They're not treated as one of us. We do have a census going on. I highly encourage everybody to fill out their census, not just because I'm a census taker right now, but because I actually wholeheartedly believe that by being counted, we can stand up for ourselves and we can be part of the equation in terms of how funds are allocated in the U.S. Another interesting thing about white supremacy is that something called colorism. This is very fascinating to me. Even though I am Indian, East Indian, in my own family, there's a lot of coloration differences, between being very dark and very fair. And I was grown up to believe that I would have a better life because I was white. And I don't think in my heart that I am entitled to have a better life because I'm white. I mean, I think the other people in my family are just as entitled as I am. Again, housing is a big issue because housing predicates what kind of resources are going to be made available to you. White middle class inherit about 13 times more income, their legacy income, than that of blacks. And when banks make out loans, I didn't know this, they actually kind of mentally regulate where they want black people and white people to live in, and they'll give out loans to people only so that they're segregated. We need more policies in place for mixed income integrated neighborhoods. I mean, although there is Section 8, etc., I still do see a lot of bias, and it's very hard to prove discrimination. So it's not working well. Education, where we can make an impact, you'll notice that 60% of Black and Latino students go to schools in poverty. So they definitely don't have the same access to education as white students. Early on, there was racial segregation, and maybe even today you see a lot of it because Black people cannot get out of their poverty cycle and they're in the quote-unquote Black neighborhoods. The teachers that we have in those neighborhoods, they're still monolingual and white. They're not of them, they're not Black, and they're not Hispanic and speak Spanish too. And schools have been trying to teach others that being bilingual was not important, but teaching English only, that was what was important. Although studies have proved that bilingualism, is better for my mental development. And more pronounced is even in this discrimination, there is discrimination within the discrimination because, for example, in immigration, they favor educated Asians over undereducated Asians. The school, College of DuPage, is trying very hard to increase the representation of Hispanics and African Americans and other minorities in the school. It's an initiative for them. And I think we need to be sensitive to the fact that college students feel microaggressions and they feel hostility. They don't feel welcome and, like they've got a soft corner to go to. So that's important. What do Blacks face when they get out after education? Unfortunately, right now, you'll find many African Americans in aid positions like social worker aide or psychiatric aide, groundsmen, or sanitation workers. They tend to be our frontline workers, and therefore, one of the reasons that I've been able to pick up experience COVID-19 disproportionately. I mean, the Black African Americans get COVID more than the other breakdown of the population because they have less access to health care. They might be poor. That could be why. They have comorbidity. They have a multitude of illnesses, on top of each other, which makes it difficult. And then there are front linesmen in many positions, and these three factors make them more susceptible and more, create a situation where they get it more easily, and then they don't go for treatment, and so then that makes it tough. They work these jobs, they're underpaid, and what I read was that their unemployment is higher than other minorities. People don't like to interview people who have Black names, and they tend to be laid off more. So they have a lot against them, a lot in society is against them. I'm assuming this can change. Healthcare. I kind of touched on it in the previous slide. They distrust healthcare. It's unfortunate because of where they live. They live in food deserts. They're not near grocery stores and fresh fruit markets. So their diets are poor and have refined sugars. They don't live very close to green spaces where they can go out and exercise and get fresh air. And quite frankly, they have racial battle fatigue. It's very hard to get up in the morning and fight discrimination day after day in several microaggressions every day. It's just plain tough. And people don't make them feel like they're even a part of American society. I read an article about white supremacy culture. I mean, what is it about the culture, and how does it promote these kind of beliefs, and how are they able to escape rational reason? One of the traits that white supremacy culture has is perfectionism. This is having little appreciation expressed for people who do all the work, and generally they give credit to only certain people. They only have right and wrong. There's no in between. There's no learning from mistakes, and they don't appreciate what's right. So the next one is diverse. What's really going on? Are we going around what we need to actually be doing in the first place? So we need to differentiate between culture, and racism. Racism is a tangled structural mess of power, oppression, and unjust distribution of access and opportunity. We are actually trying to treat the result rather than the coping mechanisms that need to be corrected. For example, Diversity Day. It's a program where in a school, white people sit with people they don't normally sit with. They mix with everybody. It might make white people feel good for the day, but it doesn't really help minorities at all. They just feel exploited. So you want to fix the injustice, not the kids. So what can we do? I always thought that education is a great equalizer. I really still believe this. Because if you're in a poverty cycle and you get a good education, you walk out and get a higher paying job, you can buy a better home in a better neighborhood, and then your kids can go to a better school and so on. It would be nice if there were no poor schools and poor neighborhoods and nobody had to deal with that situation. That would be fantastic. I don't know if that's possible. Is there a minimum level of housing and education that we can create so that nobody feels left out? So to solve this problem, we need to redistribute access and equity to learning material, technology, healthy food, and healthcare, relatable curricula, and equity-conscious teachers. The movement that we're going through right now, not a moment, but a movement. We haven't completely characterized what we need to do in order to change. We know things need to change, but we don't know how to change them yet. And I think that's what people are toying with. And I hope in the days to come, we can figure that out. Thank you so much. And I look forward to the responses to this. Thank you.